On this note, I would like to invite to the stage Professor Roman Beck. Welcome. Would you like to share the presentation?
I don't have a presentation. I will just speak.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, so Professor Dr. Roman Beck is represented at the European Decentralization Institute and Bentley University. Please go ahead. The stage is yours.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for the invitation, Max, and thank you for having me today. Indeed, I was initially planning to talk about governance and my research, but in the light of the topic of the conference, I thought I will speak a bit more about sovereignty, digital sovereignty, to rebuild Ukraine. And that is in line with, indeed, my work at the European Decentralization Institute. And as we are publishing a policy brief tomorrow, I would rather like to talk a bit about digital sovereignty through decentralization, which I guess goes a bit in line with the previous speaker talking about liquid democracy. So colleagues, attendees of the conference, thanks for having me at the Ukraine's Rebuild conference. As Ukraine looks ahead to post-war reconstruction, we face not only the task of rebuilding bridges, power grids, and cities, but also of rebuilding institutional trust and technological foundations. Today, I want to discuss an essential principle for the reconstruction, achieving sovereignty through decentralization. That principle is about ensuring that Ukraine's critical digital infrastructure, from public services and identity systems to energy markets and public finance, is resilient, transparent, and under sovereign control, rather than dependent on any single foreign provider or vulnerable central hub. Europe's own experience offers a valuable framework. Tomorrow, the European Decentralization Institute will publish its latest policy brief, where we argue that decentralization is the practical route to embed sovereignty into infrastructure. In plain terms, this means distributing control across many nodes and stakeholders, so no single failure or external decision can cripple our systems. Decentralized architectures reduce single points of failure and cannot be switched off by a hostile actor. In the context of Ukraine, a nation that has endured cyber attacks and infrastructure assaults, this approach is not theoretical. It is a matter of national survival and self-determination. So digital sovereignty in that context is the ability for citizens and governments to act independently and legitimately in the digital realm, especially when vital functions are at stake. For Ukraine's rebuild, digital sovereignty will be the backbone of your political and economic independence. The war has demonstrated the risks of over-reliance on centralized systems that can be hacked, shut down, or controlled from the outside. Decentralizing public, physical, and digital infrastructure is about closing that vulnerability gap. It also aligns with the European vision that the controls that matter, keys, code, control planes, must be within reach of our own institutions. In practice, this means Ukraine should build public digital systems on open distributed platforms, such as distributed ledgers, and I'm sure you have heard a lot about them during the day and tomorrow, where control is shared among trusted nodes in Ukraine and possibly across allied nations rather than locked in a single data center or vendor. Europe has already begun moving in this direction. We at the European Decentralization Institute call for governance-first regulation to rethink how digital platforms are governed from the outset, rather than only sanctioning misbehavior at a later point. This approach requires that our future critical systems have transparent rules for change and built-in checks and balances. As we put it, regulators should focus on how digital institutions change their rules, not only on policing conduct after the fact, and make protection of digital sovereignty an enforceable requirement in any new regulation. For Ukraine, adopting a governance-first mindset means that when procuring or developing new digital infrastructures, be it a national ID platform or an energy grid network, you must ask yourself first, who holds the keys and makes the rules? Can the system be independently audited and recovered if something goes wrong? And are we free from a dependency that could be used as a leverage against us? By embedding these questions, you ensure rebuilding is not just about restoring, but about future-proofing freedom. One of the most important lessons from recent years is that dependency on a single foreign provider or a monolithic system is a strategic risk. A central theme in Europe's digital sovereignty strategy is to measure and reduce the total cost of centralization. The total cost of centralization. And I can say this as a German citizen who always has been against Nord Stream and the dependency that it created for Germany. So total cost of centralization can be defined as the hidden costs that come from relying on centralized black box systems. And these costs include things like lack of portability or high exit costs if you want to switch systems, vulnerability to outages or cyber attacks, and loss of oversight. The European Decentralization Institute proposes a scorecard that tracks factors such as exit costs and switching time, key custody and operational control, auditability of processes, concentration risks, and emergency steering rights in every system. So what does that mean for Ukraine? This insight translates into concrete design principles, rebuild systems that should have low exit costs so that Ukraine is not locked into any vendor or technology without alternatives. Ukraine should retain custody of cryptographic keys and operational control within its jurisdiction so that even cloud-based services can be steered by Ukrainian authorities if and when needed. Systems must be auditable and transparent so that they can inspect what is happening under the hood. And there must be no single kill switch. And we have seen distributed ledger technologies and protocols having hidden kill switches. Decentralized ledgers and peer-to-peer architectures are especially suitable at this. They continue operating even if one node fails or is compromised. This resilience is not abstract. Imagine a future scenario where a crucial government database or payment system is targeted. If it's replicated across many nodes with consensus protocol ensuring integrity, the system would keep running. In effect, decentralization is a kind of digital civil defense. Kind of just in line with what we just heard about liquid democracy. I think it's very important to think about sovereignty and decentralization as a type of digital civil defense, allowing government to continue under stress. And allow me to turn the attention to identity systems, a cornerstone of any national digital infrastructure. A person's identity documents, credentials, personal data are as critical as roads and schools, as they enable citizens to access services and exercise rights. Ukraine's rebuild provides an opportunity to modernize how identities are managed, moving towards decentralized or self-sovereign identity models that enhance both security and personal agency. In a decentralized identity system, citizens hold their own verified credentials and can decide when to share information without all data residing in one giant governmental silo. The government or trusted institution will still play a role as attestation. So, for example, that person is a licensed doctor or that person owns this property. But those attestations are anchored on a blockchain where they can be independently verified and don't depend on querying a single governmental database. So why is this important for sovereignty? Firstly, it mitigates the risk of a single identity database being compromised or manipulated. Right now, we are seeing attempts to hack governmental databases. A decentralized approach means there is no single database to alter, and authenticity is proven by consensus and cryptography. Secondly, it can be extended trust beyond borders. If Ukraine adopts, say, the emerging European self-sovereign identity standards being compatible with EIDAS 2, Ukrainian citizens could securely use their digital IDs across Europe in the future. Ukrainian citizens, including those displaced abroad, could benefit from an identity system that is both secure for tampering and portable. Such a system, for instance, might allow a Ukrainian student in Poland to prove their qualifications or a displaced family to access aid without waiting for paper records. In practical terms, adopting decentralized identity might involve issuing verifiable credentials for things like education certificates, professional licenses, or healthcare records on a blockchain. Projects in Europe are showing the way. For example, Catalonia in Spain piloted a self-sovereign identity for students. And then there's EPSI Vector, a European consortium exploring blockchain for diploma verification. Ukraine has already observer status in European EDIC, the consortium in charge of EPSI, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure, and Ukraine should take full advantage of that observer status. Rebuilding Ukraine's physical infrastructure, especially the energy systems, will be one of the largest investments in the country's history. By reconstructing power plants, grids, pipelines that have been damaged, there is a chance to not simply restore the old grid, but to reimagine the energy architecture as a more decentralized, renewable, and community-driven one. In so doing, no enemy can take critical energy infrastructure as hostage, as it is currently the case with a nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia. Decentralized ledger technologies can play a pivotal role by enabling local energy markets, peer-to-peer trading, and transparent management of resources. So what does this look like in practice? Consider an example from Austria. Their country's largest utility, Wien Energie, together with a blockchain company, launched MyPower, a platform that tokenizes solar energy assets and opens up ownership to everyday people. Through MyPower, citizens can invest in a portion of a solar panel installation and receive tokens representing their share of the energy production. In essence, it is an example of how blockchain transforms consumers into prosumers and spreads out both the ownership and resilience of an energy grid. Crucially, a decentralized energy strategy can attract international investment and engage the public. Donors and development banks are more confident funding projects that have built-in transparency, and communities are more likely to support and protect infrastructure that they have a stake in. This kind of communal stake is an aspect of sovereignty too, empowering Ukrainian communities to co-own the assets that power their lives. Rebuilding Ukraine will require enormous public investments and international aid. How to manage and track these funds will determine not only the success of reconstruction, but also the trust of citizens and donors. This is where decentralization intersects with transparency and accountability in the field of public finance and procurement. Blockchain is essentially an open ledger, a tool ideally suited to ensure that every expenditure, every contract awarded, and every donation is recorded immutably and can be audited by the public. And Ukraine already has a globally recognized e-procurement system, ProZorro, which was developed after 2014 to fight corruption. ProZorro, while not blockchain-based, proved the power of transparency by providing a public record of all procurement decisions. And it has saved taxpayers money by exposing corrupt practices. The system's motto, "Everyone sees everything," encapsulates that principle. Some researchers studying ProZorro have noted that if combining such digital record keeping with blockchain, Ukraine can get an immutable tamper-proof log of spending and bidding for to further reduce fraud and even speeding up contracting. For Ukraine's reconstruction, blockchain-based registries for reconstruction projects where each project's funding, contracting, and progress reports are locked, is something to consider seriously. The World Bank and the EU could even be nodes on these ledgers and thereby reinforcing trust. What I have outlined is an ambitious agenda using decentralized technologies like blockchain to fortify Ukraine's sovereignty across digital infrastructure, identity, energy, and finance. This vision is not utopian. It is actually a practical framework, one already taking shape in parts of Europe that Ukraine can adopt and tailor to its unique circumstances. The underlying theme is sovereignty by design, building new systems in such a way that the very architecture of those systems upholds Ukrainians' independence, resilience, and values. Instead of centralized black boxes, choose open distributed rails that embed rules that do not break under pressure, as we have seen in the European, and as we are saying at the European Decentralization Institute, pilot sovereign decentralized rails in critical sectors, acting now, embedding sovereignty into Europe's digital foundations, and turn structural dependency into strategic autonomy. Ukraine can do the same, embedding sovereignty into their very code and hardware when rebuilding Ukraine. I might have been a bit fast with my presentation, but we do have time for questions about that if the audience are interested to discuss this further with me, and I would be happy to do so.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. And we have 2 questions. I'll put them on the screen. I hope you can see it, right?
Now I can see. I switched to the comment.
Yeah, okay, I'll read it.
Is that the first one?
Yes, yes.
The government using the blockchain to say if it comes from the source, it is trusted. Otherwise, it's fake, false. I'm not sure if that is actually an argument in favor of having governmentally controlled public blockchains or against. My argument was that decentralized nodes, even sharing nodes with other allied nations, might help to provide a public permissionless blockchain system, open source, that allows the tracking and tracing to rebuild trust in the structure and to organize value creation and capture in decentralized networks. That is what we ultimately aim for at the European Decentralization Institute. I hope it somehow answers that question. If it doesn't, kind of please, Blockchain Professor X, specify your question again. And then you have a second one. Are the zero knowledge proofs being used for privacy here still very computationally intensive? I didn't speak about zero knowledge proofs, but of course you can combine zero knowledge proofs into that model, into that framework. There are other ways of keeping a secret without using computationally intense zero knowledge proofs in decentralized protocols. We can have that technical discussion, but of course it would also be important to know in which area zero knowledge proofs make sense and are required. But yeah, zero knowledge proofs make a lot of sense if there is no other way of keeping a secret, of keeping something private that is not meant to be made public.
If you want to post a question, you can use the YouTube comments section. But I also wanted to use this opportunity to ask you, as I know you were Ukraine is an observer in the sandbox, and we're paying attention to what's happening there. And as you're doing some oversight there as well, could you share some learnings of how it works? Because we also have a sandbox, and especially in the dialogue between legislatures and builders.
So you're referring to the EU blockchain regulatory sandbox that is spreading across Europe and is not focused on EU countries solely. In that sandbox, also Ukrainian companies are welcomed. Before I'm saying a few more words, lessons learned about the sandbox, let me say my reference to the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure and the European Digital Infrastructure Committee, EDIC, is sort of like the host organization also of the regulatory sandbox, and Ukraine has also observatory status there. And it would be great to see more involvement from Ukraine, kind of looking into that as well. Now back to the sandbox. The regulatory sandbox currently is running its third cohort. I'm sitting in the jury, selecting the companies, the startups, the organizations that is going into the regulatory sandbox. We are currently in the third and last phase. We had 20 companies in the first, 20 in the second, and now 20 in the last. And the whole idea is actually not only to make sure that the startups, the scale-ups are becoming regulatory sound and compliant with whatever underlying regulation is applicable to them in healthcare, in finance, in supply chain management. We just had the question from the gentleman about provenance. It is also actually something where different regulators from different countries come together. So you are not only speaking to the regulator in your respective country, but to regulators across Europe. And in that regard, that sandbox is quite unique. I know that a lot of countries do have also national sandboxes in finance. That is a sandbox that is not limited to finance. That is number one. And number two is it is actually bringing regulators from different countries together. Also because if you are registered in the European Union and you ask for passporting your registration to have access to the European market, it is of course also important for other regulators to understand what is the rationale, what is actually good practice in regulating companies. So the sandbox you are talking about is a sandbox for companies as well as for regulators to learn from each other. And in that regard, I think this is one of the smarter and really kind of great ideas that came out of Brussels, having a sandbox that brings regulators from Norway, from Switzerland, from Spain, together with a use case, let's say from Ukraine, right? Learning from each other. And the intent is not only to help the companies to develop regulatory sound business models in a decentralized space, but also to come around with smarter regulation in the long run. And in that regard, I do hope that the European Commission finds money to have another 2-3 years of the regulatory sandbox funded. As I said, the current third cohort is coming to an end beginning of next year. And what we have seen, you asked about learnings from those regulatory sandbox experiences. We have seen a tremendous improvement over the years in the quality of the business cases. They have been great in the first year, but within this short time frame, we have seen a significant professionalization and depth of the use cases that I personally makes me very optimistic about the, let's call it, decentralization economy in Europe. We also had over the years almost the same interest for each of the cohorts, something, don't nail me down on the specific numbers, between 80 and 100 applications for those 20 positions in the sandbox. So there was a large number of consortia and startups and scale-ups who wanted to get into the sandbox. The quality was always high, but was increasing over the years. And it was from different industries. So of course, we are often talking about the financial services industry. We are talking about DeFi, but we are seeing also in other areas interesting decentralization developments. And last but not least, it was almost evenly, not perfectly evenly, almost evenly distributed across Europe. So there is actually a positive signal. Now, what we have to make sure in Europe, and that is, of course, I'm right now here in Boston at Bentley University, we are seeing that the regulatory certainty the current administration here in the States is providing by pushing through not only the Genius Act, but also what is coming forward is the Deploying American Blockchain Act, is giving so much certainty and legal grounds on federal level in the United States that it has a big push on the blockchain industry. I hope that through the blockchain regulatory sandbox, startups in Kiev and in Warsaw and in Paris have the same positive push effect, kind of wind under their wings through positive regulation that finally is sort of fully embracing and understanding that blockchain, ledger technologies, cryptocurrencies came to stay and should be incorporated and not prevented from happening. And as I said, the regulatory sandbox is, in my eyes, a good example for fast learning, institutional learning, adaptation, and hopefully improvement in regulation and accelerating innovation throughout Europe.
Thanks. And maybe you can also share maybe an example of a success story of a project that have developed significantly through this.
We have seen DeFi cases. Kind of, here's the thing. Kind of, I signed an NDA, so I can't really specifically talk about individual cases. But I can encourage everyone to follow the EU blockchain regulatory sandbox on LinkedIn. We are seeing that kind of cases are released once in a while. We are seeing actually very interesting combinations also in the most recent cohort. I can answer abstract, but I can't point to a specific case, Max. I hope you understand. So we are seeing an amalgamation of different technologies, right? Obviously, AI is a big trend, and we are seeing that, you know, kind of deterministic, non-deterministic smart contracts, combinations of AI decision making and ledger execution. Semi and fully autonomous systems that operating on a distributed, sometimes decentralized, so permissionless blockchains are in use. We are seeing that actually the combination of different technologies is becoming more commonplace in harvesting the full potential of moving from automatic systems to autonomous systems. And that is a big push in pharma, in healthcare, in finance, in logistics. And there we are seeing these kind of combinations. And I would say this is a winning combination, and also something that is seeing increasingly on EU level, on national level, increasingly is seeing more regulatory certainty because we now have the environment increasingly in Europe that is allowing these businesses to flourish.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe there's time for last question, if any.
Again, I decided against slides kind of last minute the day before yesterday, because I thought before I'm talking about my research, which might be boring, I really kind of embrace Rebuild Ukraine and take the insights from the recent policy brief into this discussion. That might be more spot on to this conference than me talking about governance aspects from my research. But feel free to ask more questions, and also reach out to me if you have more questions beyond today. And if there are no further questions, thank you for having me, Max, and I wish you all the best for this fantastic conference. And next time we should meet in person in Kyiv.
Yeah, I hope so, and appreciate your approach with today's presentation. Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks a lot. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.